Week 17 of the fantasy baseball season. Here's a few hitters I look to buy right before fantasy deadlines approaching today and the next couple days in some other leagues. The first guy, Kyle Tucker of the Houston Astros. So it's been a struggle for Tucker over the last couple months here. On the season, numbers still pretty solid though. 20 home runs, 70 RBIs, 16 stolen bases, 46 runs scored, 247 average, and a 335 on base. But over the last month of the season, 3 home runs, 11 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 8 runs scored, a 205 average, and a 283 on base. So right here, Tucker, he was a guy that went early in fantasy drafts, late first, early second round in most leagues. And obviously, he's not living up to that billing where he was a top pick like that this season. So the last few games here for him, August 2nd versus the Red Sox 0-3. August 3rd versus Boston, 2-4, running 2 RBIs. August 7th at Cleveland, he walked in that ball game. August 9th versus Texas, 1-3 with a run and a rib. And August 10th versus Texas, 3-5, a homer, 2 RBIs. So right here, maybe he's going to break out of the slump a little bit with that 3-hit game August 10th versus the Texas Rangers. But right now, he's still not living up to par. And he's been struggling, like I mentioned, the last month of the season. So right now, I think a starting pitcher could get the deal done and not a guy who's putting up huge numbers this season. But Kyle Tucker, we know what he's capable of. He's a guy that definitely could go on a hot streak and carry a fantasy team or even the Houston Astros for a little bit of it at a time. So right now, if you need a power bat in your lineup and a guy who's going to drive in runs, even though the batting average has been bad over the last month of the season here, Kyle Tucker is definitely a guy I would go out there and try to get. The next hit is George Springer of the Toronto Blue Jays. So Springer, he's good for 1 or 2 injured list appearances this season, and that's where he is right now, is Springer on the 10-day IL with the elbow injury. On the season, pretty solid numbers, 18 home runs, 49 RBIs, 10 stolen bases, 59 runs scored, a 251 average, and a 331 on base. But over the last month before he went down, a homer, 9 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, and 9 runs scored. So Springer, we haven't seen him in game action since August 4th. We know he's the engine to this Toronto Blue Jay offense, batting first for this team. I know the power numbers are down a little bit this season, but once he comes back, he's another guy that could carry the Blue Jays for a few weeks when fantasy owners, because we've seen times where Springer gets on a hot streak and he could hit 10, 15 home runs in a month if he really gets going here. So right now, I believe he'll be back maybe in a week or 2 here, Springer. I know the Blue Jays signed Jackie Bradley Jr. a couple days ago, so he's just going to fill in the meantime. But once Springer's back, he's just going to be a backup if he's even remaining on the roster. So right now, with Springer down with injury and not a set timetable for sure for him to come back here, he's definitely a guy we'll go out there and try to make a move for, because he's another guy that could get hot at any time and help fantasy owners. And right now, while he's on the discount and injured, this is the time to do it. The next guy's Matt Olson of the Atlanta Braves. So Olson, it's been a pretty solid season for him in his first year in Atlanta. Just the power's down a little bit, and the batting average, 21 home runs, 70 RBIs, 55 runs scored, a 248 average, and a 337 on base. But over the last few weeks here, he's really struggled. 1 home run, 4 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 217 average, and a 321 on base. So Matt Olson, a lot of doubles he's been hitting this season. I believe he's got 40-plus doubles already on the season. This Brave team, they've been playing good for the last month and a half. The only hiccup they had was that series versus the New York Mets, losing 4 out of 5. But they're a team I just can't count out, and Matt Olson's been struggling. So right now, this would be a perfect time to go get him, because this is another guy, if he gets hot, watch out for the league and watch out for fantasy teams that are versing that team who's got Matt Olson. The last few games here for him, August 3rd versus Philly, 0-4. August 4th at the Mets, 0-4. August 5th at the Mets, 2-4, run and a rib. August 6th at the Mets, 3-8 with a run, 2 RBIs. August 7th at the Mets, 0-4. August 9th at Boston, 1-4 with a run. And August 10th at Boston, 1-4 with a run. So right here, the Mets, they did in this Atlanta Brave team here. But this Brave team, they're going to bounce back. They're going to play good baseball, and they got a matchup with the Mets next week, a 4-game set in Atlanta. And it wouldn't be surprising to me to see the Atlanta Braves here get going in that series and get some payback after the Mets took them out 4 out of 5 in Citi Field. So Matt Olson, it starts with him a little bit here to get hot and get going. And the power just hasn't been there, and the numbers have been a struggle. But once he gets on pace here, it's going to be dangerous for a lot of teams, and he's going to be a big fantasy guy towards the end of the season. So right now, if you could get him on a discount this will be the time to do it, obviously, with the trade deadline approaching. And while he's been struggling over the last few weeks, the next guy's Charlie Blackmon of the Colorado Rockies. So Blackmon, he got off to a slow start in the beginning of the year. Then he got things going good, and now he's been struggling again on the season. 16 home runs, 61 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 54 runs scored, 262 average, and a 313 on base here for Blackmon. But the last few weeks here for him, no home runs, 2 RBIs, a stolen base, 4 runs scored, 174 average, and a 220 on base. So Blackmon, I don't think you got to give up much at all to get him in a deal here. Probably a decent starting pitcher will get the deal done. And Blackmon's a streaky guy now. It's not like the Blackmon of a few years ago where they had a lot of protection in the lineup as well for him with Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado. He's a guy that's still batting first, still going to get on base, but there's going to be times where he don't do much for a few weeks. He's just a streaky player now as Blackmon. August 3rd at the Padres, 0 for 3 with a rib. August 4th at the Padres, 2 for 5, 2 runs. August 5th at Arizona, 1 for 5 with a stolen base. August 6th at Arizona, 0 for 3. August 7th at Arizona, 0 for 1. August 9th versus the Cardinals, 1 for 5 with a run and a ribbon. August 10th versus the Cardinals, 1 for 5. So right now, I'm not doing much. Pretty idle for the last few weeks here is Charlie Blackmon. But like I mentioned, he's a streaky guy, but he does go on those hot streaks where he can help your fantasy team big time for a few weeks. And right now, while he's in a down period, this is a perfect time to trade for him. And I think a decent starter will get the deal done. And he'll be a perfect third outfielder or utility guy for fantasy owners. And the final hitter I look to trade for this week and buy is ONeil Cruz of the Pittsburgh Pirates. A Cruz available on 33% of waiver wires. But this guy's a great talent. I know he's off to the slow start so far in the first number of months in the major leagues with only 156 at-bats but 9 home runs, 29 RBIs, 21 runs scored, 5 stolen bases, 212 average, and a 248 on base. So the last 2 weeks, I know he's not hitting it all. 3 homers, 8 RBIs, 5 runs scored, 186 average, and a 239 on base. But ONeil Cruz, he's going to be fine. This guy, he's got the tools, and he's a big guy too who's going to have power at minimum right now in his major league career. 9 home runs, 156 at-bats is a pretty good start. But he's got to get used to the strike zone. He's got to learn it more. And he's got to learn the major league pitching. But right now, as a utility guy or even a shortstop at a weak shortstop position, I would still have confidence in making a deal for Cruz. And you could either pick him up off the wire in 33% of leagues, or you make a minor deal to get him on your roster. And that's what I would try to do here. August 4th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 4. August 5th at Baltimore, 0 for 4. August 6th at Baltimore, 1 for 4. A homer, 2 RBIs. August 7th at Baltimore, 0 for 4. August 8th at Arizona, 0 for 3. And August 9th at Arizona, 2 for 4. So right here, starting to get it going a little bit here is ONeil Cruz, especially in the power department, and just trying to get at least a hit a game here. But right now, this guy, in the next few seasons, I think he's going to be a big-time player in fantasy baseball. Right now, I know it's only his rookie season, but I still would have confidence to go out there and try to get him. And like I said, you don't got to give up much at all to get him. So that's a few hitters I look to buy and trade for Week 17 of the fantasy baseball season, with deadlines approaching today and in the next few days for fantasy owners.